Welcome, Dr. Joe, to another podcast of Journeys of Not So Ordinary People. How are you doing there?
I'm doing good, man. You see the smile on my face. I'm prepared for this. Again, it's another great day. The weather's going to be great today. Get outside with the wife and have a little fun. But as always, I'm excited to see your smiling face on the other side of the camera. So
Yeah,
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Joe. Really appreciate it. I always look forward to our weekly get together where we do our one to many podcasts and get them ready to be put out the next week. So another day in paradise, doing what we love.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So this week we're going to talk about taking time for yourself, and Joe and I were talking. We were like, "What are we going to talk about this week? Let's talk about taking time for ourselves. What does that mean?" And Joe and I are not spring chickens. There's an old phrase that probably should be left alone, but we're far from being teenagers, and our high school days are long behind us. But
Yep.
from high school to today, we've had quite the journey, and we started thinking, how did we manage this time, or how did we not manage this time to get from point A to point today? And we want to talk a little bit about taking time for yourselves, for your family, and things that you can do about burnout, avoiding burnout, and hopefully how to avoid burnout. I think I just said that twice. So,
Yeah.
I'll go ahead and kick things off. And I'm going to start out with around school. I don't want to go back. Well, that is going back a ways, but when I really started having to make a conscious effort to manage my time, when I was in the military, it's kind of like you show up for work, you do your job, you go home. That was pretty straightforward. So when I really started having to manage time was when I started going to school. At that time, I was a single parent, um, and had my son, had custody of my son, and how do I manage work and custody and spending time with my son, work for myself, and going to school? Well, when I first started, it wasn't so bad. I was a single parent. I didn't have my son every day, so I could kind of juggle that a little bit easier. But when I got married a short time later and had to manage family and spending time with my wife and time for myself and work and school, it became a bit of a challenge because at that time in my bachelor's program, I was spending at least 15 to 25 hours a week on school. So how do I mix that with working full time and having a wife and a son? That's a great question. I don't really remember how I did it. I
Yep.
just started doing it. And then when I rolled into my master's program, because I didn't take a break, it was a lot easier for me because I was only doing about, 10 to 15 hours a week for my schooling because I was in my zone. I was just cruising. I was just like, I've got this. And so it was a little bit easier, spend a little bit more time with and with my wife and with my son. And, you know, that was kind of easy. And then I took some time off and went into my doctoral program. And that's really when I had to make a conscious effort because when I started my doctoral program, I was really literally putting in 40 to 60 hours a week for probably the first 6 months while working full time. So it was like having two full-time jobs. Now where do I find the time to spend with my family and have time to myself to recharge my batteries? And the answer is at that time I wasn't.
Yep.
And that's when things started getting really challenging for me. And I took you through that little bit of a progression to show that, I was kind of winging it, and then it really wasn't an issue to now it's almost a problem. And
Wow.
about 6 months into my doctoral program, I had to do some really serious critical reflection with myself because I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to make it through. I knew I wouldn't be able to make it through at that pace because I was starting to get burned out from not only my job but from school. So I got with some colleagues and got some ideas and really started making a deliberate effort to take 2 days out during the week, one for my family and one for myself. And that was very scary because I'm already doing 40 to 60 hours a week on my schoolwork. How do I get that down to, hey, you need to take 2 full days out of that schedule and do nothing?
Right.
And it's like, well, if I do that, then stuff isn't going to get done. And the reality of it was, when I forced myself to take a day out for myself and a different day out for my family, it forced me to have a more deliberate focus on what I was doing. And what I found and what I realized was I was spending less time in the minutia and more deliberate times toward working towards achieving that particular task or that assignment or that research paper. Fast forward to the present day, we can apply that same basic knowledge to what Joe and I have been doing. So for the last 6 years, we've met, we've talked about it, we've developed a friendship, we've talked about managing our schedule, working different book projects and other projects. But it really wasn't until we made a conscious effort to focus on what we're doing and make time for certain things like the podcast, like our consulting businesses, like our books, with a conscious, deliberate effort to say, we're not going to talk about business every day as much as we enjoy it. We are going to take time out for our families and for ourselves. And again, what that's done is created that deliberate effort to focus on managing ourselves and our time with ourselves and our time with our families and our time with work and our time with, our podcasts and consulting and stuff. So where does that leave us? Well, that brings us to today. And we wouldn't be here today if we hadn't figured out that time for ourselves and our family, those two separate things, are very, very important for not only focusing, having deliberate focus, but for recharging. Joe and I both experienced burnout with our work, with our consulting businesses, with our books, with a lot of different projects we've done, we've gotten burned out on because we've lost sight of how important time for ourselves and our families are. You need to take that time and recharge, and you need to invest that time in your family with your kids and your significant others and your spouses, so that relationship doesn't degrade. So with that brief introduction, Joe, what are your thoughts on taking time for yourself?
So thanks, Dave. And yeah, very similar to your situation where you were, and like you, I won't go back to the beginning of time when I was born, but rather it was that time when things got really crazy, and it really was when I went back to school. Same thing. I had been out of school for so many years. And when I was before that, it was high school. So that was your only job, was to go
Yeah.
to school. But now, like you said, you factor in, full-time job. I had 3 kids, a wife and 3 kids. That were really active in sports and school and things like that. So to now take on this responsibility or this new thing, which was education, that really I was not prepared for it. And so, like you said, I jumped right in, both feet, with the expectation. I set myself, and I probably set myself up for failure more than anything, because I said, hey, I'm going to be done with this degree in this time frame. And so I approached it that way. And so I just threw everything into it at the same time. Like I say, still, being a dad, being a husband, working full time, I just gave it everything I had. And so that worked through the undergrad, the bachelor's degree and then the master's degree. But like you said, once I got to the, doctorate level, it changed. It really got intensive on the commitment that I had to make to that process. And so it really did start to show its face as far as the burnout, like you said, or, the um, just over exposed to everything. And so that's when it really started to hit me. And like you, I had to figure out a different way to approach this, because I had gotten to a point where I was ready to walk away from something. I had a lot of major things going on in my life, and I wasn't sure which one I was going to have to put to the back burner or put to the side. And so I had some really long conversations with good friends. And even at a point, I told my wife, with the education piece, I said, hey, I'm ready to quit. I don't know if I can do this anymore. And fortunate for me, she didn't let me quit. She told me that I had to continue. So having that support helped me with that reprioritizing, that refocusing my efforts and energy and try and figure out how I could do this. And so after a really long conversation with a good friend of mine, kind of like you said, you seeked out, peers and things like that. I had a really long conversation with a friend, and I told him where I was at, how things were starting to overwhelm me. And he said, take a breath, you know,
Yeah.
just take your time and let's think about this. He said, what are the major things that's going on in your life? We identified those things. And then he told me from there, let's prioritize those things. Because
Yeah.
what was happening with me was I was just giving everything to everything. I couldn't settle on, okay, I'll give this major thing 33%, this other major thing. It was 100% to everything. And of course, the numbers don't add up. And
Yeah.
so, and that's where I was. I was at that point where I was trying to do everything. And it wasn't until, he made me kind of visualize what that looked like. And so that's what I did. I prioritized what I determined was the number one thing for me. And it was, to focus on that thing, give it as much, time as you could. And then the others, and kind of like you said, I felt like it, but if I don't work on this is going to suffer. This is going to go away. And it was the opposite. Like you said, once you started to really focus on that plan, those things, then it made more sense and it did work itself out. And so some of that was, spending time with the family because, at the point working full time and then going right to an event for the kids and coming right home, grab something to eat and then jump right into school mode. So
Hmm.
yeah, a lot of time was not, I had to later apologize to my kids and my wife that I did take away time from, with them because I was on that journey or focusing so much on those things. But when I reorganized or reprioritized those things that I thought was so important, I did, take the time to factor in time with the family and doing different things. And that helped me tremendously. So, for me, every Sunday was a day where I would go play basketball with my family, my sons, my brother, and friends. And that was for me, my downtime.
Hmm.
Regardless of what was going on, I'd try and do that because that was that downtime. So it doubled as two things, time with my boys, and then again that time for me to take a break. And then other days, the wife, we would do different things. So yeah, if I would not have done that, I don't know where I'd be today, whether I would have quit school or whatever those other important things were. I don't know, but it wasn't like you said until you take that um deliberate approach to taking time out for yourself, taking a break. And you just said it too, even these past couple of weeks, we'll have a conversation, we'll communicate back and forth, and both of us have had to say, hey, I'm going to take a break today, I'm
Yeah.
going to do something with the wife, or I'm going to do something around the house, just to get our focus off of those things, but to, again, to give back to our spouses or significant others and say, hey, let's spend some time together. I mean, just even the other day, Dave reached out to me and I'm like, I'm just sitting here watching TV. I just wanted
Hmm.
to, take some time to just kick back and watch some basketball. So I did. And so
Hmm.
I've gotten much better at that, but it took many years for me to get to that point where I was rewarding myself with just taking time off and not doing anything, not having a schedule to, adhere to or checking any boxes saying I got that accomplished. It was more just don't do anything. Just
Yeah.
if you don't want to go outside, or, for me, it's one major relief I've had is now I ride my bike a lot. And that's a time for me to spend a couple of hours out in nature, ride the
Hmm.
trails, just to get out of my own head, just kind of relax. And so I've been more focused on that. And like I say, with the family, whenever they reach out, we go do what we can. So, but I know if I would not have really taken some deliberate steps or effort to take time out for me and the family, things might be a little bit different. So,
Yeah, yeah. And you mentioned a couple of things. Being all in when you're engaged. And then the other piece that I want to talk about is outside of school, so post school. So you brought up a great point that, when we're taking time for ourselves or with our family, you got to be all in. You can't be distracted, looking at your network. And I'm guilty of this, looking at your network messages. Oh, so and so just wants to do this, or so and so, checking your emails for, responses, or, replying to clients, or, what have you. You, similar to when we're working on a project or working with a client, you got to be focused and all in on that particular task, because if you're distracted, it's going to show. One, it's going to show to your
right,
client, it's going to show to your supervisors, your colleagues. And, it's like when you go to work and people are like, hey, how are you feeling today? You look distracted. Is everything okay? And it's like, I'm fine. It's like, you're a liar. You're not fine. Something's got you distracted. What is it? And it's
right,
like, well, I've
right,
got this going on. And it's like, okay, well, while you're here, we need your focus to be on this. And that can be challenging if you have stuff going on in your personal lives and it crosses over into your work life, whether it's a regular job, part-time job, volunteer work, or maybe a consulting business or teaching. People will pick up on the fact that you're distracted or something is interfering when your focus isn't there.
and Dave, I was just gonna say that, but you beat me to the punch. But that was where I thought that's where you're going, but I wanted to highlight that again because we think we're doing such a good job of hiding
Mhm.
those distractions or appearing to be focused on certain things. But you're right, people are gonna pick that out. They're gonna see that, yeah, your focus is not here, or you're
Mhm.
distracted in some way. But we're trying to come in and put on that,
Put on that
hey,
happy face. Oh,
I'm
I'm here.
focused. But you're really not. So that is a very good point that we think we're hiding it, and we're really not.
Yeah, we're really
So
not. So, think of the focus that you need to have with your job so you don't lose it. But you need to have the same thing, that same dedication to focus when you're with yourself and with your family. Because if you're physically present with your family, but you're distracted and you're not all in, they're going to pick up on it. Just like if you're trying to spend time with your, for yourself, recharge your batteries, if you're not there for yourself, you're going to know it. You're going to know that when you're out riding your bicycle or doing your projects around the house, that if your head is at work, you're going to realize that that paint stripe is really a polka dot when you're done with it. You're like, wow, I was not paying attention
right,
like I should have, so, really be all in and present in that moment, because your kids will pick up on it. If you're at a
yeah,
game and you're like, you're not rooting them on because you're on your phone, and they look over because they just scored a goal and your face is down in, whatever you're doing, they're going to realize that you're not there. You
right,
might be sitting
yeah,
in the stands, but you're someplace so much further away. And your employ just like your employer will pick that up, and your family will pick that up. So make sure that you have that time, that it's quality time for yourself, whether it's video games, whether it's cleaning, whether it's working on the yard, whether it's spending time in the park, whether it's, maybe you like to draw, or, spend time with your friends, whatever it is, you need to find that distraction for yourself. And that's been really hard for me. Um, I know Joe struggled with that. We've had this discussion that Joe and I, we just sitting still is not in our vocabulary. It's like,
right,
let's watch a movie. Yeah, let's take that challenge on. I'm up probably 20 times. It's like, what's the movie about? Oh, it's about this. I don't know how you got that, because you weren't in your seat for more than 30
right,
seconds. So
right,
Joe and I like to stay busy. So it's kind of a challenge to force ourselves to not be busy and to just unwind. And my wife told me that early on when we met. She's like, I need to teach you how to relax because you're a spaz. And it's taken me a long time, but I'm getting there. So,
right.
okay, so let's shift from focus to post school and just kind of like work and taking time for yourself there. So there was a point in my career where I was teaching, and I was teaching a lot over a couple of years. And when I was teaching, I was, again, all in. But the
Right.
challenge that
Yep.
I was dealing with is I was teaching multiple classes where the schedules overlapped. So when you looked at the schedule, it wasn't Monday through Thursday or Monday through Friday, off Saturday, Sunday. It was like Sunday through Wednesday, Wednesday through Saturday, Thursday through Monday. It's like, or, I had multiple semesters stacked on top of each. So there wasn't any time off. And there was
Right.
a 6-month period where I was, and I'm not trying to brag or boast because it's nothing to brag or boast about, but I was working about 90 hours a week with 0 days off. I didn't take time for myself and I didn't take time for my family for 6 months. And by the time of that end of that 6 months, I think I taught probably, I think it was 6 or 8 classes, and I was burned out. And it was at that point that I realized, as much as I love to teach, I couldn't justify the investment because I couldn't, there was, I didn't have the time in the schedule to manage to take away. Because if I took a day off from one, it wasn't just one item, it was 2 or 3 classes I was taking
Right.
time off
Right.
from, and something was suffering. And so it was at that point that I realized I really need to take a step back, evaluate what I'm doing to myself and what I'm doing to my family and what I'm doing to my friends, and how I'm allocating my time. So the reason I bring that up is because it correlates to having multiple jobs, working 2 full-time jobs or working, 3 or 4 part-time jobs to equal a full-time job. How do you manage that time? And as much as I'd like to say that Joe and I have the answers for that, we don't, because that is a very challenging scenario to be in. I've been there, and I couldn't do it. What I did do is realize I needed to do something because what I was doing was not working. And maybe, and the answer I had was to back off on the number of classes I was teaching. That was the
Yeah.
only answer I had, because it wasn't good for my physical or mental or emotional health. And that meant if you take in less classes or less work, yes, you are making less, but it keeps you from burning out. And what I realized, by better managing my course load, I was able to find that time to focus on other things like family and self. And
Well, so Dave,
it's
you
it's
bring up a
tough
good
sometimes.
you bring up a good point too. Even because one of the things you said was, you teach less, you're going to make less. And
Yeah.
so at the end of the day, so like you said, you had that heavy workload for those 6 months. You were basically doing just that. So when do you have time to
Yeah.
enjoy that extra money that you were making? You
Yeah.
really don't.
You
So
really don't.
what are you doing? You're really working yourself to death, or to not good
Yeah.
health, into
Yeah.
those types of things. Just maybe destroying relationships, those types of things.
Yeah.
So is it worth all that extra effort
Yeah.
to put into those projects or to whatever you're doing? At the end of the day, what does that
Mhm.
amount to?
Yeah.
Again, you may make a few extra dollars, but what have you lost in that
Yeah.
process? And so
And
those are some of the things you need to consider as well.
absolutely. And one of the takeaways I got was I needed to start working smarter instead of
Yeah.
harder.
Yep.
And
Yep.
what I realized is that if I dropped 2 classes, I could focus on spending and investing a little bit more time towards finding a different line of work. And that's what I did. And it created a shift in the paradigm. So I was working this much, making this much. Now I'm working this much, making this much. So I was able to shift my schedule. So
Right.
now
Yep.
it gets back to, again, manage your time versus effort.
Yep.
You want to work 4 part-time jobs for 90 hours a week, or do you want to work a full-time job for 40 hours a week? You're making less, but it gives you time to maybe to work 1 part-time job to meet your financial needs and still have that extra time with your family. So
Right.
it's a delicate balance, because it's something that we don't really think about too often, is managing our time for ourselves and for our family, because we're focused on that dollar, or that, that
Right.
income
Yep.
amount, or that prestige, or that image, or that whatever. And that focus of energy has detracted us from what's really important, and that's taking care of ourselves and our family. Because if we don't take care of ourselves, we can't take care of our family, and that's really the bottom line. I mean, and I commend those folks that are listening and watching that are going through that experience, because it's not comfortable, it's not enjoyable,
No,
but hopefully
not at all.
what they'll glean out of it is there are little things that you can do to try to get yourself into a better position. And it does take effort, and it does take time. But
But I
again,
think it
so
goes back to what you said earlier, Dave. You know, it does take time and effort, but for me, and you mentioned it too, the biggest thing was that deliberate
yeah,
intention to change it. And like you said, you had to do the critical self-reflection, which
yeah,
in my case too, that's what happened to me. And I won't rant on long about this, but the same thing, you know, for me, I had to figure out, I had a lot of things on my plate too. And so that was one of the reasons why I recently retired from the military, because
mhm,
and we just talked about this before we went on the show, but
yeah,
I didn't realize how much time I was actually, even though I was in a part-time role, I didn't realize how much time I was actually contributing to that
yeah,
organization, and how much I was taking away from my family. So that actually helped me with my decision to go ahead and retire, because like I said, we said it earlier before, I'm not one of these, I'll give you parts of, you know, of myself. I give you everything. And that's what
mhm,
was happening. So now, you know, it's been a year and a half, and I just can't believe all the time that I have back. Like I
yeah,
said, to now focus on the family and other things. And so just taking that deliberate time to really evaluate, you know, those
yeah,
important things. And like I said, to mention, yeah, if you want to have multiple jobs, that's fine, but at the same time, what gains are you getting out of that?
yeah,
You know, doing those types of things, and that's like Dave said, yeah. If you just do it smartly, you know, really look at the pros and cons of it. But the biggest thing is, we all know we can't go back in time. I
yeah,
mean, once that time is gone, it's really hard to recover from it if you
yeah,
you know made some really bad decisions as far as not spending time with the family, because you know those kids grow up and family
yeah,
members get distant if we don't really put time into, you know, growing as a family or being
yeah,
around for them. So
yeah, yeah,
I just want to throw that out there. I know we're getting close to wrapping up, but
yeah, yeah. So we'll go ahead and any final thoughts, Joe, before we wrap
no,
this up?
you said it earlier. It is a challenge with all, everybody's got so many things going on. It's just taking that deliberate time to, you know, evaluate where you are and where you want to go. Maybe that'll help you determine, you know, how much time you contribute to certain things. But you know, you have to really look at it. Uh, Burning both ends of the candle is not recommended, because, like you said, in your case, it took 6 months, and you realize it was really too much.
Yeah,
And so, and I also got to that point too, where I was like, man, something's got to give. And
yeah,
so we don't want to have to make decisions based on that type of scenario. So
yeah,
the more deliberate we get about it, the better chance of, you know, making those decisions that are going to be a positive impact rather than a negative impact.
yeah, yeah. And that's great. Great. Those are great observations, Joe. I'll close out my thoughts with, if you can't take a day or two out a week, then take an hour, or take a half an hour, take 15 minutes, something, but just make it quality time, because some people, some of our viewers and listeners don't have days of the week to
Right.
dedicate. Sometimes it's only hours or minutes, and that's okay. But you got to take that time out and just make sure it's quality time, and uninterrupted, and just focus. So with that, want to thank our viewers for tuning in, and our listeners for listening in. Once again, have a wonderful rest of your week, and keep on being your not so ordinary you.
All right.